Most people die at 25, but they aren't buried until they are 75. This is a quote which has been attributed to Benjamin Franklin, although it appears unlikely that he actually said it. But that's not really important. What's important, I think, is how disturbingly accurate this statement is. When I came across it recently, it completely stopped me in my tracks. You know when you come across one of those simple, succinct phrases that's just like the missing piece of the puzzle you're trying to solve? Well, this is one of those phrases. Let's think about it for a moment to try and understand what this phrase really means. Obviously, most people don't literally die at 25. After all, the average life expectancy in the developed world is somewhere around 80 years today. So the age 25 does not correspond to a literal death, but it appears that the age 75 does. So what kind of death are we talking about at age 25? It must be a metaphoric one, right? But in what sense? Well, something important happens around the age of 25, and that's because our physicality reaches its peak. And what I mean by that is our bodies and our brains have more or less fully matured and reached their kind of optimal state, from which point, as we continue to move through time, they will slowly decline. But that's not the death I think this phrase is referring to, or at least that's not how I would personally frame it. There's a larger, more encompassing death, which I think occurs around the age of 25, and that's the death of growth. Not growth of the physical body or the brain, but a more fundamental and abstract growth. Let me explain what I mean. First, let me ask you a question. Do you feel as though time noticeably sped up as you approached and then surpassed your mid-20s? Do you feel as though when you were a child, 1 year seemed like such a massive expanse of time? Could it be just simply that the more years you experience, the faster they seem to go by because the novelty of the passage of time wears off? Or could it be something else? From the moment you have any conception of who you are, society has designed a systematic roadmap for you to carefully follow. You begin with preschool, then grade school, next is high school, and finally maybe some post-secondary school. And within this matrix, a series of progressive milestones are embedded within it to help mark the passage of time. It could be as simple as the completion of a grade, as emotionally significant as your first dance, or it could be that one final moment where you throw your hat in the air, which marks the end of your academic career in its entirety. Every year, there are at least a few of these milestones, and in a way, they provide clear and obvious examples of your progression through the stages of life. For example, between grade 1 and grade 2, it's just 1 year, but there is a noticeable change in yourself from those 2 grades. But at some point in your 20s, the music suddenly stops. There's no more bells that ring that signify the end of classes and the beginning of summer. No more report cards which detail your performance over the semester. No more rooms full of peers at the same stage of life as you, being guided by a common teacher. Almost everything in your life that has guided your life and marked the passage of time through milestones has stopped. Just like that. And as the phrase goes, I think this is the supposed death for many people, because from this point forward, no more growth occurs. I want to be clear, I don't necessarily mean growth in the sense of success or some metric related to it. I suppose what I mean is more something along the lines of growth of our character, in the same way that we would hope that someone who's in grade 8 is a more well-rounded person than somebody who's in grade 1. But can we say the same for somebody who's 38 versus somebody who's 30? Sometimes but sometimes not. And I think as we progress further in age, the difference becomes less and less apparent. Can we blame them? Can we blame us? I mean, how could we? When up until this point we were so coddled and then suddenly thrown to the wolves. How would anyone know how to design their own life when it's been designed on their behalf for decades? I personally struggled with this, and I feel like I still do. I remember I felt like the passage of time was increasingly speeding up, and I wasn't sure that I was developing as much as I should be from one year to the next, or at least as I felt that I used to. I reached a point of peak stress when I think I replaced all the metrics and milestones of the school system with the metrics and milestones of YouTube shortly after starting my channel. I remember waking up every morning with headaches and my body felt tense all of the time, and I was really irritable, easily agitated, and would sometimes like fly into fits of rage. Eventually, this stress in my mind culminated in my physical reality at the hands of a seemingly innocent apple. As I went in for my first bite, I quickly realized that something was wrong. Normally, when my teeth face off against the skin of an apple, it's a triumphant victory. However, today was a decidedly different kind of day. As I bit down into this apple, I felt a small, hard object fall into my mouth. So curiously, I reached in, pulled it out, and realized that I was holding a very, very small chunk of one of my teeth. I stared at it and I was kind of stunned. Why did this happen? Why did my tooth chip from biting into an apple? Well, I got my answer the next time I visited the dentist, and they told me that I had been grinding in my sleep. And no, I'm not talking about work grinding or grinding at the club. I'm talking about grinding and clenching my teeth. Suddenly, the morning headaches made so much sense. The stress I was putting my body under made me tense up so much to the point that when I was sleeping, my body would just go into some type of weird thing where my jaw would just tense up, clench, and then grind my teeth. Ever since then, I wear a night guard to sleep, and that's basically just like a mouth guard you put in your mouth before you go to bed. This one is by a company called JS Dental Lab, who is actually sponsoring today's video. JS Dental Lab provides high-quality, long-lasting night guards backed by a reputation of nearly 20 years in the business prior to offering their services online. I know what you're probably thinking. Isn't this kind of a random thing to shout out in one of your videos? And yeah, I can totally understand how it may seem that way. But let me explain to you why it isn't. First of all, this was actually something that very much positively impacted my life. I wear it every single night and I haven't had a headache since. And if you experience similar symptoms, then I think this could actually really help you. Secondly, I had the opportunity to actually speak with one of the co-founders of JS Dental Lab, and I quickly realized that I love the way that they run their business. The conversation really resonated with me and aligned with my values. My main takeaway was that the number one priority they have is customer experience and satisfaction. From the easy guard creation process to the 1-year money-back guarantee to the hundreds of transparent and positive reviews, not to mention the fact that the co-founder explicitly told me that they don't operate as a subscription service because they don't want to churn out flimsy night guards that have to be replaced frequently, costing you more money. They specifically give you things like this nice bamboo brush to clean your guard and back it up with a 12-month money-back guarantee. So if you wake up with headaches in the morning or experience any other related symptoms to grinding or clenching your teeth at night, I can't recommend checking out JS Dental Lab enough. You can find a link in the description below to check them out, and if you do decide to get your own guard, you can get 13% off with a little coupon code down there to tell them that I sent you. Thank you for sponsoring this video and for saving my teeth. So besides mitigating the side effects of this death that we may experience at 25, besides making sure that our teeth don't fall out, what can we do to try and get back to that environment of continuous and deliberate growth? I've thought a lot about this question, and in my mind, I think the way to achieve it is to design our lives in the same way we may design a video game. I played a lot of role-playing games growing up, so, if I'm playing something like RuneScape, I can look and see I have all these different skills to choose from to level up, and as I level up these skills, I reach certain milestones, which then unlocks a new abilities for me to use. While this might sound a little bit silly, games like this are a reflection of life. Art imitates life, right? So why don't we invent our own game for ourselves? Wouldn't that actually be kind of a cool thing? The game that we were forced to play before is now over. And yes, while there wasn't really a clean transition between that game ending and whatever game we want to play beginning, perhaps if we're courageous and curious enough, instead of dying at 25 and that being that, maybe we can become born again. I understand. I see it with my own eyes every single day that people are either unaware or they're afraid to actually realize and grasp the reins that they've been handed, the reins of their own life that they can take control of. The sheer multitude of directions you can go in can be paralyzing, especially when there's no more guardrails on all of these trails, right? And some of them look just downright hazardous. But what if we made it a little bit easier for ourselves by categorizing some of the different areas we could embark upon an adventure in the same way that the school system categorized subjects? Perhaps there was some wisdom in that. Although I would suggest to never forget that a subject is not a unique and distinct entity, but rather a lens through which to view the one and only subject, which is life itself. What I mean by that is biology, chemistry, and physics are not unique and distinct things separated from one another, although the school system may present them as such. What is physics, if not the study of the movements of bodies, organic or otherwise? What is biology, if not the study of the composition of said body, if it is organic? What is chemistry, if not the study of the composition of said body? And finally, what is quantum physics, if not the study of the movement of the composition of said body? You see my point. Different lenses looking at the same subject. So in my view, post-school system, it is up to us to decide which lenses we want to level up so that we may better understand the one and only subject. And as we level up in these domains, can we create our own milestones to mark our progression and the passage of time? If you're interested in piano, can you make yourself an annual test of a particularly challenging piece of music, or schedule a recital with your friends and family? A fun excuse to gather together. And speaking of the passage of time, perhaps we could pick up where the ancients left off and judge time not as the digits on a computer screen or a watch or a calendar, but by the passage of the sun, the moon, and the stars. A few years ago, I had this very strange experience where I was staring at a newly blossomed flower on a tree, and I felt as though I was seeing spring for the first time, and I intuitively understood what spring actually was. Ever since then, paying witness to the changing of seasons, particularly immersing myself in nature at the peak of these changes, like going backcountry camping, this has given me a much different perspective on the passage of time, one that's more circular as opposed to linear, one that's more patient but deliberate. And with this perspective, I'm now trying to allow myself to approach these lenses through which we can view life and progress through them in a more circular way. If you recall a little while ago, I spoke about how lately I've been feeling like I know less and less over time, but how that might actually be a good thing. My friend, wise friend, Tyler Wells, who, if you watch Maddie's channel at all, you've probably seen him there, he introduced me to this very interesting framework. Essentially, there's these 3 stages that you move through left to right, but then eventually you actually cycle back through them. What you're looking at right now is actually an image that we took of the whiteboard where he was drawing out this diagram for me on the last deep conversation that we had together. So looking at this here, you can see that the first stage is that you establish a functional identity. So for example, if you wanted to learn boxing, then you would identify as a beginner boxer. This is the moment that you are committing to learn something new. The second stage is simply doing the learning. It's progressing. But more importantly, it's learning from others who have already progressed further than you within this particular domain of knowledge. So it's following someone else's teachings. And finally, the third stage is called experiencing, because this is where we actually take what we've learned from other people and we start applying it ourselves and testing and trying everything out. But at this point, something very interesting happens, because once we actually start to get our hands dirty, we realize some things. We think, hey, you know what? I know this person said that this was the right way to do it, but you know what? I think that this might actually be the right way to do it. That's because something important is happening. As we progress left to right across this framework, this is called mastery. But if we continue, we may find that we actually start to head back in the other direction, going back through those other people's teachings, critiquing them, and kind of recreating our own systems and teachings. And we ultimately arrive back at the beginning, establishing a new identity, redefining ourselves. And this is what we can call originality. I fear that many of us only progress in this fashion from left to right up until the age of 25, and we don't allow ourselves to go through this process of redefinition. And what this results in is, instead of ourselves dying and then being born again, evolving every single time, we just simply die.